Hi, I'm Lara. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. We have a million things to talk about. We're doing a series on the mind map, especially focusing on our safety-seeking instincts. Safety-seeking instincts kick in when we feel under stress, even minor stress or threat. They can kick in. So in extreme cases, when instinctive safety-seeking behavior is so severe that in repetitive, that it interferes with your functioning, your daily functioning, it causes you distress, it's a psychiatric disorder. You can kind of loosely, if you think about it, group some of the major psychiatric disorders, some mental health stuff, under the fight, flight, freeze, full, feed, and fight. They can be kind of categorized in this way. So as with everything, with all of these, you can have hyper, which is too much of something, and hypo, which is too little, and they can both be problematic. So like if you move too much, that's hyperactivity. But if you move too little, that's depression. Both can be treated, but that's just an example of how our safety-seeking primal instincts become psychiatric disorders. So let's start with fight. Okay, so fight can become antisocial personality disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, reactive attachment disorder. It can become different forms of self-harm and other impulse control disorders. So antisocial personality disorder is like, sometimes people call it being like psychopaths or sociopaths. It's the same basic thing where it's just this pervasive pattern of just violating the rights of other people, right? Not really caring. And sometimes it comes with a sort of superficial charm that they can kind of con people and talk people into stuff. But but it's fundamentally aggressive. No respect for boundaries. So that's what fight can look like in terms of actually becoming something that is so much a part of your personality that we can diagnose it, right? It's so pervasive and it's so central to what the person does, how they respond to just about everything, that it's an actual disorder. Okay, so flight, one of the psychiatric symptoms associated with trauma is called dissociation. Now, dissociation is just like zoning out. It's like I'm here, but I'm not really here. So I actually have a great story about this. I was doing a group. I was working in an addictions facility. I was doing a group, and I did, a whole half hour, 45-minute spiel about trauma. And we talked a lot about dissociation. At the end, I got all their evaluations, and one person said, well, they didn't learn anything from this, which of course was the point, was to learn something, so I made sure to follow up. And I sat down with her, and what I just said is exactly what she said. She said, well, it's just that sometimes it's like I'm just here, I just zone out, I'm just like spaced out, and, it's like I'm here, but I'm not really here, and like I can't really, it's like I don't really notice everything around me. So it really wasn't you, it was really just me. And then I kind of like laughed at the irony of this, that like I just spent 45 minutes explaining why you dissociate to a dissociated person. So that is kind of a form of mental flight. All right. We can also have something called avoidant personality disorder. That's kind of flight when it becomes part of your personality, where you just avoid anything difficult, any kind of challenges. Flight can be associated with a whole lot of anxiety and some other kind of problems with controlling our impulses. Now, fool is stealing and concealing. It's lying, cheating, stealing, concealing. So that can be associated with like narcissistic personality disorder, paranoid, even aspects of antisocial personality disorder. Histrionic personality disorder was something, it was taken out of, I think, the most recent book about mental health disorders called the DSM-5. But foolishness, like narcissism, a lot of people argue, now there's a debate about this, but it's kind of like there's this very vulnerable internal self that the narcissistic person is protecting by putting on a big mask, like a big show. So the narcissistic person is sort of a chameleon, is sort of, posturing, projecting something that they aren't really, in order to protect this vulnerable inner self. Now, other people argue, like, lots of narcissists they just think they're great, and they don't see it as a problem, even if everyone around them sees it as a problem. But a lot of narcissistic stuff is a lot of foolishness, because usually people who are narcissistic very much inflate their abilities, their worth, their wealth, all that kind of stuff. Paranoid personality disorder, where there's also some foolishness there, like everyone's out to get you, okay, projecting this onto the world that that you're in this kind of constant danger. But there's a lot of kind of self-concealment that comes with paranoia. There's a lot of foolishness that comes with paranoia, like really misperceiving reality. Antisocial people will often lie very systematically, do whatever they have to do to get what they want. Histrionic personality disorder tends to inflate, right? That means, just a really powerful, strong reactions to stuff going on. Well, here's an example, and I'm not making, this is just an example, It's hard being so beautiful. People just don't understand. Stuff like that. That's the kind of thing you might see in what was formerly called histrionic personality disorders. But again, there's this kind of concealment, lots of mask wearing, and a lot of lying to self, and difficulty perceiving the world with any right-sized perception of the world. Feed. We all know that we can become very disordered in our ways of eating, right? So hyper would be binge eating disorder. Hypo would be anorexia. And going back and forth, sort of pinging between hypo and hyper, right, would be bulimia. But there's also other ways that our feed response manifests. I argue that substance abuse is really a feed response. It's sort of this compulsion, this compulsive taking of a substance outside of ourselves to change our inner state. A lot of people would say that there's kind of the whole process of kind of seeking out and procuring drugs is kind of a hunter-gatherer set of behaviors. Gambling disorder, anything where there's a compulsion and craving and collecting and consuming, I think falls under the feed disorders. Hoarding is another one, that kind of compulsive craving. That feed is a lot like a squirrel sort of hoarding its nuts, for the winter. That's kind of what some of feed looks like. Internet addiction, obsession with computer solitaire, that's not my problem or anything. A lot of ways that our feed disorder manifests. And then last, which is one of the ones that ends up causing so much devastation. But, sex and love addiction, there's some debate, I guess, in the mental health world, but I really believe sex and love addiction are very real things. Pornography addiction, compulsive masturbation, hypersexuality, being kind of overly sexual, is a very common symptom of bipolar disorder. In bipolar disorder, you see, I call it is it 3 S's or 4 S's? Speeding. People in manic episodes get a lot of speeding tickets. Their speech is also really rapid. They start talking like this. So speeding, spending, people tend to go on credit card binges, sexing. So there's a lot of compulsive sexual behavior that happens in a manic episode. All those things sort of disappear when the crash comes and people are depressed. Then there are the usual problems of getting activated. So hypersexuality can also go along with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. It's a both symptom and a central struggle for people. Now, hyposexuality, kind of not having sort of normal sexual instincts, because we all have them as humans. Hyposexuality can be a symptom of what's called schizotypal disorder. So anything that we would say a schizoid disorder has a lot to do with kind of you would probably perceive the person as kind of odd, but maybe having a fair amount of boundaries where there's not that much desire to connect with humans, certainly physically. So those are some examples of how our deepest primitive lizard brain safety-seeking instincts can almost harden into something that systematically can cause us to function in a way that's not helpful, that's not healthy. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for listening. Do the thing. What do all the YouTube people say? Like and subscribe and leave comments. Any good movie scenes that exemplify any of this stuff, or any experiences that you've had, please leave them in the comments. Thank you so much.